What's happening, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome into the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can always follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. In just a moment, I'm going to be going through my players who I thought either helped themselves or hurt themselves in Saturday's first preseason game. So just kind of checking the temperature of some players who are kind of on the bubble. But before I get to that, I want to obviously go over Jordan Love's injury. On Sunday, we received mostly good news that it looks like Jordan Love avoided any serious or major injury, which it kind of was seeming to lean in that direction, right? In the post-game press conferences, Love said he was hopeful that it wasn't anything serious and that he was hoping that he was going to be able to play this upcoming Saturday against the Jets. But we did find out that he is going to miss a couple days of practice, and there is the potential that he could miss the game against the Jets on Saturday. Now, in the overall scheme of things, that's good news, right? You obviously don't want to see him have any lingering major issue, and you don't want to see him, or Green Bay have to potentially find a backup quarterback, because as nice as the Kurt Benkert story is, you don't want him going into the season as your number 2 quarterback. I think I'm safe in saying that. So I do think, however, that if he does in fact miss some of these joint practices with the Jets, as well as potentially the game on Saturday, there's certainly a level of disappointment there, right? This is a player who every single one of these live reps can be super beneficial. Once the season starts, he's not going to get a ton of those. So, getting those reps, one-on-ones and in team drills against the Jets on Wednesday and Thursday, as well as in the game on Saturday, would certainly help the overall development of Jordan Love. So could still be disappointing. Now, it sounds like he's going to miss Monday's practice for sure. Tuesday is a walkthrough. If he's able to come back Wednesday, even Thursday, and play on Saturday, there's certainly still a lot to accomplish out of that, and that would be probably a best case scenario at this point. However, again, if he does miss some of those joint practices as well as the game on Saturday, Green Bay is going to have to find a player to sign to kind of fill that spot, because you can't go into the game with just Benkert. That certainly wouldn't be good. So there's going to have to be some decisions made. And again, still some disappointment, but overall good news on Jordan Love. And, we'll see what happens. I think the other interesting thing is, because he gets to wear the red jersey in practice, maybe there's a situation or scenario where he actually practices on Wednesday and Thursday in the joint practices with the red jersey on and no, concern of getting hit. And then maybe they hold him out of the game on Saturday, not wanting him to land on a shoulder, aggravate something, something like that. So a lot of decisions for the Packers and kind of what to do with Jordan Love this week. But again, the overarching good news is that it's nothing serious. And no matter what, it sounds like he should be back in about a week and hopefully be able to play in that final preseason game. All right, let's get to the main topic today. And that main topic is the 5 players who either helped themselves or hurt themselves with performances from this past Saturday's preseason game against the Texans. I will have an honorable mention as well. Let's start out with the honorable mention. I'm going to go with Yosh Nijman, who I think hurt himself in this game. Now, I'm going to be fully transparent, have not had the opportunity to go back and watch a second time yet. I know Pro Football Focus actually had him in their top 5 players on offense for this game. I also know that, the big sack fumble that is sort of, stood out as a negative on Nijman's resume from Saturday night. Matt LaFleur said that was a 50-50 between both Yosh as well as Jordan Love on the play. So what does that mean? I'll walk you through really quick. And again, some of you will know this, but anytime a quarterback takes a 7-step drop or less, they're sort of within, or I should say a 7-yard pocket or less. They're within their normal quarterback pocket, and it's up to the offensive line to protect them within that, kind of bubble, if you will. What happened on this play is that Jordan Love got deeper than 7 yards. So think of it this way: you're an offensive tackle, right? And if you've got an edge rusher screaming off the edge past you, but they're going past 7 yards, you're not concerned over it. You're just arching back to that 7-yard mark, and you're just kind of pushing them and keeping them going around that edge, and they just end up going in a circle, and the quarterback stays within the nice friendly confines of that 7-yard box without ever having any issue from that edge rusher who took this aggressively long arc to the quarterback. No big deal. That's normal football. You see that happen on a ton of plays. However, when the quarterback drops back to 9 yards, and as an offensive tackle, you're setting up so that they don't get to that 7-yard mark, Now all of a sudden he comes, screaming off the edge, and where Yosh is thinking, all right, I'm still in a good spot. I could just kind of continue to keep them at that 9-yard mark. Well, all of a sudden Jordan Love is at 9 yards. Now edge rusher gets a free rein to the quarterback or a free run to the quarterback, and Yosh looks like an idiot, right? When really Jordan took about 2 yards too deep of a drop, which is why it becomes a much more dangerous situation. If he's at 7 yards, that edge rusher now has to bend in, where it gives Yosh an opportunity to recover, push him past, and kind of keep Jordan Love clean in that situation. Now, as Matt LaFleur mentioned, and as I'm sure Yosh would let you know, still was not a great rep from Yosh. You want to see him handle that a bit better regardless, but definitely some blame on Jordan Love on that particular play as well for just getting a little bit too deep in his drop. That being said, from the naked eye, from me watching from the press box, I did not think that Yosh had a great game, and this is one of those games he had a ton of snaps. I believe he had more snaps than anyone in the game, or at least anyone on offense, if I remember correctly. This is really his opportunity. He didn't get a ton of chances these last couple of years when he basically had 2 redshirt seasons. Like it's now or never. And this is a player who has looked the part, physically, who has the physical attributes, but needs to put it together. And it's sort of a now or never. And I think myself and a lot of people were hoping for maybe a little bit more. Maybe not expecting more, but hoping for more because the Packers have put in so much time, effort, and energy into him. So we'll see. And the reason he's an honorable mention is because, again, there were some positives in this game. And I still think there's 2 games, like that's his first time playing legitimate snaps in years, right? So let's see how he handles game 2. I don't think it's like he's sunk after this, but you would have liked to have seen him play just a tad bit better in that opening game. All right, let's get to my remaining 5 who I think did either help themselves or hurt themselves. I'm going to start with KB Nento because, of course, I'm starting with KB Nento. Definitely helped himself in this game. Again, I think he's, from a special team standpoint, is going to be one of the better special teams corners, which gives him a leg up in that number 6 spot. But, being able to consistently show off those ball skills, picking off a pass. Yes, the ball was thrown right to him, but they have the wherewithal to come off of his guy, make a play on the ball, finish the play, actually get the interception, and really a really nice spot, too, right after the Packers had turned it over. Again, he has shown nothing but potential from the day he showed up at training camp, making the transition from wide receiver to corner. I still think he is somebody that the Packers have hopes for, that he can continue to grow in his maturation at the cornerback position. And I just think plays like this, and then he had another play where he was targeted and he kind of broke up the pass. He did have a pass interference, but it was a fluke play. You could tell entirely. It's just two ships crossing in the night. And yeah, KBN probably has to have a little bit better wherewithal, to kind of have a heads up on that type of situation in that play. But overall, I thought he had a really nice game and really gave himself a leg up over, the Kadar Hollmans, the Josh Jacksons, Stanford Samuels, who didn't play. I thought that was a really positive performance for Ento. On the flip side, of course, the player who hurt himself the most in this game, in my opinion, is Josh Jackson. And we discussed a lot of this yesterday in yesterday's pod. But at this point, after playing outside corner, inside corner, safety, special teams, punt returner, everywhere in his career, there's just nothing that he's done well enough. You're in year 4. You've had you've had different defensive backs coaches, you've played different positions, you've been in different defenses, you've played man, you've played zone, you've played off, you've played press, and there just hasn't been anything where you can point to and be like, he's getting it, he's picking up on it. And as I mentioned, there were other plays where he didn't get targeted, where he got beat in that game, where I was watching him and saw him just not be able to stick with his man. The foot quickness just isn't there. You saw it in the punt return. Dude ran like 50 yards to the sideline and couldn't gain an ounce in forward progression just because he doesn't have the quickness to turn a corner in this league. So, sometimes you'll see some testing in college and you're like, you know what? I think this player has everything else to overcome it. His poor foot quickness just hasn't been something that he's been able to overcome. And it's not just that, it's been his ball skills, his propensity to grab at the point of attack, when he's beat and not just kind of recover and make a play on the ball. He hasn't shown enough of that playmaking ability that he showed in college. He doesn't have the ability to be a core special teams player or a punt returner. And here's the more difficult thing for Josh. He has the most exorbitant contract of any of these guys, over Kabian, over Kadar Hollman, over Stanford Samuels, and add on the fact that he would be an unrestricted free agent next year. Whereas Kabian and a lot of these other guys, Stanford Samuels, would still have controllable seasons. Like, Josh is literally behind the 8 ball in every way, even if the play is equal. His pay is more. He has, he's been in the league longer. He's a little bit older than the majority of those guys. He, again, has no team control in his contract after this season. Every other corner that he's battling against has the advantage in every discernible way. So he has to outplay them to make this team, and that has clearly not happened. So I think he really, really hurt his cause this past Saturday. Player who helped, I think Oren Burks. Now, I'm not sure Oren Burks is on the bubble, so to speak, and his play may have put, others on the bubble, Isaiah McDuffie, maybe even Ty Summers. I think Kamal Martin's a pretty safe bet to still make this team just based on potential, but I think Oren is arguably working himself into the number 3 linebacker spot. And that's a pretty big development. I mean, you've got Devondre, you've got Chris Barnes, and then I think Oren Burks might just have worked his way up to number 3 on the depth chart if he can continue this performance. And again, the story coming out with Burks is in college, he was an edge rusher. He spent time at safety. He spent time at linebacker. And the hope was that his time at linebacker would allow him to be a firm, consistent tackler who can play in the middle of the field. His time at edge rusher would allow him to improve as a blitzer. His time at safety would allow him to improve as a cover guy. And unfortunately, it was sort of one of those jack of all trades, master of none, where he got to the NFL and we found out wasn't really good at linebacker, wasn't really good at coverage, wasn't really good at blitzing. He's done all of them, but he didn't do any of them well. Now we're starting to see a little bit more fire, a little bit more tenacity. I thought his blitzing looked good this last game. I thought he looked good wrapping up. His overall confidence looked way better. And everybody's player progression works a little bit differently. Hopefully this is a turning point in Oren Burks' career. Certainly not ready to label him anything after one preseason game where there was definitely some miscues as well. But that was the fastest, most aggressive, and most confident we've seen Oren Burks play, and I think that's only a positive for him. Next up is Malik Taylor. And I actually initially had Devin Funchess on this list, and I definitely think Devin Funchess helped himself. No questions asked. Let's put it this way. If you were Brian Gutekunst, Matt LaFleur, you, me, anyone, and you had to choose which wide receiver for one game that you would want to throw to from either the Texans or the Packers side, you would choose Devin Funchess. He was clearly the most refined wide receiver in that game on either side on Saturday. I don't think it was particularly close. He was clearly a step above. However, and again, I think that was a good game for Funchess, and I think that definitely helped his overall cause as well. However, what you have to look at is the job description for the number 6 wide receiver. As I mentioned before, there's just not a ton of balls to go around, at wide receiver. Adams, Lazard, MVS, Amari Rodgers, Randall Cobb, those guys are going to take the majority of the snaps on offense. The number 6 wide receiver needs to be a special teams guy. And the reason I put Malik Taylor in my positives actually doesn't necessarily have anything to do with special teams, but he showed legitimate competence as wide receiver. Now again, who would I rather throw to if I were the quarterback tomorrow, Devin Funchess or Malik Taylor? It is Devin Funchess by a good amount. But the job description for receiver 6 within this offense with which wide receivers are, on this team I don't need another receiver to throw to. I need somebody to get down the field on kickoffs. I need somebody to get down the field as a gunner on special teams. And Malik Taylor has the leg up on any of these fringe wide receivers, probably any wide receiver on the roster when it comes to pure special teams. So he wins that. And now if he shows competence at wide receiver, where if everything hits the fan and you actually need him to get in the game as a number 3, number 4 wide receiver, he can still go out and play a little bit and maybe help you out a little bit. That would be a big step for Malik Taylor. So I thought he helped his cause with how he played as purely wide receiver because we already know he's going to be the best, special teams player of that group. And then last but not least is Vernon Scott. And it's been interesting with Vernon Scott because for the most part at that dime safety position this year, it's been Will Redmond in minicamp and OTAs, and it's been Henry Black since he got back, ahead of Vernon Scott at that dime safety position in training camp so far. And with Vernon Scott, we haven't seen a bunch of them. You also have, Enos Gaines, who's played well, Christian Uphoff, who's had his moments. So it's like, it's really tough to tell. It's one of the more difficult positions. And again, Redmond's been out of training camp. Henry Black's been getting a lot of time. After those first two, it's really difficult to figure out who's next up in the pecking order. And it still seems, I think, that Redmond and Black are ahead of Vernon Scott. But Vernon Scott had a really nice game coming down and attacking in the running game. He looked good. He had a really big hit on a play. Looked pretty good in coverage, which I feel like for the most part he's held up better in coverage in camp, much more than Henry Black. He's the more physical tackler of the two. So I thought this was a really nice step. Again, I don't know that Vernon Scott was necessarily on the roster bubble, but I don't think you could also say like he was 1,000,000% safe either. I thought this game helped him with that. Again, he could really develop into a core special teams player as well. I like him eventually in a nickel linebacker safety spot. So I think there's still a lot of upside for Scott. I think he showed that on Saturday, and I think, again, he overall helped his cause. So honorable mention, kind of not great, Yosh Nijman. Helped themselves, KB Nento, Oren Burks, Malik Taylor, Vernon Scott, and to an extent, Devin Funchess as well. And the player that definitely hurt themselves the most was Josh Jackson. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. Greatly appreciated as always. I'll be right back here tomorrow with a brand new episode, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.